I smelled resin and rain the night they came, not burning pine but the sharp bite of a storm rolling off the frost-marked peaks. In Hollowmere, storms meant the Alpha patrols would call pups indoors and the elders would hum old warding songs. That night, the songs stopped mid-note. I was in our root cellar, tucked between sacks of barley and a coiled rope, clutching my grandmother's pendant, a hammered silver ring etched with a crescent and 3 tiny cuts like claw marks. My mother's voice shook when she said my name. Mira. Whatever you hear, don't come out. I had presented Omega at 13. In Hollowmere, that meant soft hands and supervised days, escorted walks to the spring, lessons in etiquette in case a regional lord ever noticed. No one imagined the Alpha King of the Northlands would notice anyone from a village like ours. But the drums from the ridge came in patterns we all knew, and the answering horns from the road told me the king's endos had reached our gates. Boots thudded overhead. The cellar hatch swung open, lantern light pouring down the wooden ladder like liquid gold. A man and woman in slate-gray cloaks stood framed against the storm, wolf sigils worked in dull thread on their shoulders. Mira of Hollowmere, the woman said evenly. By decree of His Majesty Kaelin, Alpha King of the Northlands, you have been scented and selected as a potential bride. You will come with us. My voice failed the first time. The second time, it was a rasp. I wasn't at the circle. Your cloth was? The man answered, lifting a folded square of linen with my initials. The king's advisor carries gifts for scent reading. His verdict was specific. Mother pushed in front of me, palms lifted. She's young. 19. The envoy replied. Old enough to choose. His eyes softened. And free to return if the king finds no bond. The word choose rang in my skull like a struck bell. In Hollowmere, Omegas were guided. Rarely asked? Now the storm crowded in, lifting the hair on my arms. I closed my fingers around the pendant until the edges bit. I did not want a palace. I did not want a crown. I wanted to stop shaking. Pack a bag, said the woman, kinder now. We ride before the road washes out. I took 10 minutes to fold my life into a satchel, a wool shawl, a dog-eared herb book, the pendant on its leather thong. When we climbed into the covered wagon, thunder straddled the ridge and Hollowmere's gate swung shut behind us with the quiet finality of a story ending. I told myself this was only a chapter break. The next line I would write. The road north ribbed my bones for 6 days. We skirted valleys where water shone like spilled steel and slept in way houses built into rock like swallow nests. The envoys gave their names, Saren and Iago, then left me to think. Thinking turned into rehearsing every rumor about the Alpha King, Kaelin the Wintered, crowned at 15 after a border war, Kaelin whose voice could still a brawl. Kaelin who sent 3 selections home across 7 winters and took none to his side. On the 5th night I couldn't sleep. Saren joined me by the brazier with a tin mug. We call him Ruthless, she said, because he is. But he is ruthless like an avalanche is ruthless. When the mountain is threatened, he keeps his claws for enemies. For his own, he is iron and bread. Bread? I asked despite myself. Reliable. Filling. Warm. The image startled a laugh out of me, small and unsteady. Why me? Saren blew on her tea. Advisor Thorn has a sense for resonance. He carries cloths, ink seals, little tokens. He says the king's wolf listened when yours sang past fear. I didn't sing. I muttered. Wolves hear what words don't. She tipped her mug toward my clenched fist. That talisman, keep it close. You'll want something that smells like home when stone and glass start echoing. Stone and glass. Caer the Lost rose on the 7th dawn, carved into the mountainside like the ribcage of a sleeping giant. Windows of green-blue crystal caught the sun and shattered it into 1,000 shards across the courtyard. Guards in pale mail stood like winter trees. My knees remembered Hollowmere's packed earth, and tried to buckle. Servants swept me along a corridor washed with light, under tapestries of rivers and constellations. In a room bigger than our entire cottage, steam rose from a copper bath. A beta attendant, Unia, with dark eyes and a practical mouth, washed the road from my hair and set a gown of dusk blue wool across a chair. "The king will see you this evening," she said. "Not a court presentation. Just His Majesty and Advisor Thorn. Speak truth. He hates honeyed talk." "What if my truth is that I'm afraid?" I asked. Unia's mouth tilted. "Then you will be the first to say aloud what everyone brings to him like a hidden bruise." Dressed and braided, I followed a sentinel through halls that hummed with restrained power. He stopped before doors carved with moon phases and set a hand to the bronze. On the other side, a firelit chamber lined with shelves, a table with maps pinned by river stones, and a man standing with his back to us, broad-shouldered beneath a black tunic, dark hair knotted at the nape. "Your Majesty," the sentinel announced. "Mira of Hollowmere." "Leave us," said a voice like low thunder. It rolled through my ribs and steadied nothing. The doors closed. He didn't turn. "Rise," he said, and only then did I realize I'd folded into a curtsy, Hollowmere's lessons dragging me down. I stood, hands iron flat against my skirt, and waited to be looked at. "Look at me," he said. My Omega nature answered before my pride could. I lifted my gaze. The Alpha King's eyes were a weather change, storm gray tipped with silver at the edges, set in a face cut for command and wearied by it. Not the monster of Fireside Tales. Not safe either. "You weren't at the circle," he said. "My cloth was," I answered, voice thin. The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, acceptance. "Truth sits easily in your mouth. It stumbles most days," I said. "Tonight it is trying. Let it try," he replied, and finally turned fully toward me. "We'll both need practice." Advisor Thorne slipped in quietly, all angles and amber eyes, and took a chair by the map table. The king poured 2 cups from a dark bottle and handed one across without ceremony. My hands didn't shake until stem and firelight met. "Drink or don't," Kalen said. "But sit." He took the opposite chair, the hearth's flames painting his knuckles in copper. "Do you know why you're here, Mira of Hollowmere?" "Because a cloth told you something about me," I said. "And because the council is counting winters on your crown and wants an heir." Thorne's mouth twitched like I'd passed the test. The king just nodded. "All true. But not complete. You're here because I have rejected 17 candidates who would have looked perfect on a coin." "I won't look perfect on a coin," I said before sense could stop me. "Perfect coins buy very little," he answered. "I want a partner who will stand beside the wolf and the king." The word partner struck like a match in a dark barn. I heard my mother's old warnings rattling, "Omegas are safest behind good doors." But I saw the map table and the worn places at its edge where fingers had pressed hard during hard decisions. "What do you fear most?" he asked. "That I will be ornament and cage," I said. "Paraded and locked, too precious to be useful." The king's eyes softened, something dangerous defanged. "You have met betas who treat Omegas as heirlooms. I have been treated as a glass jar full of light," I said. "Wrapped, placed on a shelf, admired, dusted. Never opened. And yet you are here." Thorne leaned forward. "Why?" "Because leaving was a choice no one expected me to make," I said, and felt the truth of it loosen something tight in my chest. "Because I am tired of being spoken for. Because I would rather fail at standing than succeed at hiding." Kalen did smile then, brief and startling. "Tomorrow I'll ride the lower terraces to check flood breaks and mills. Come with me. I want you to see what I call mine." "Yours," I echoed, bristling. "What I protect," he corrected simply, catching the flare. "Not possession. Duty." Thorne rose. "We start at first light," he said, eyes on me. "Wear boots you can trust. And Mira." He tapped 2 fingers to his chest. "Trust your lungs. The mountain demands breath." When they dismissed me, Unia was waiting with a cloak and quiet approval. Alone at last, I set my pendant on the table and realized my palms no longer hurt. I had unclenched around my fear. A small beginning. Sometimes, grandmother used to say, That is enough to change a road. Morning cracked thin and cold. Horses stamped in the courtyard, breath ghosting the air. Kaelin sat a massive bay called Ash, a beast with the opinionated ears of a soldier. "Whose is mine?" I asked Unia. She let out a dapple-gray mare with clever eyes. "Kestrel. She forgives mistakes quickly and remembers lessons longer. Like a good teacher," I said, then flushed to hear it. We took the cliff path first, switchbacks hugging rock where the palace bled into mountain. Wind combed my hair loose within 3 turns. Below, terraces angled down in green tiers, winter kale, hardy leeks, rows of willow for basketry. Workers looked up and touched brows, not deferential, just aware, and Kaelin answered each greeting by name. He knew whose child broke a wrist, whose mother needed a warmer room, which millstone had chipped before thaw. The wolf beside the king had teeth, yes, but I saw hands that lifted, not only claws that tore. "A kingdom is a pack with more roofs," he said as we paused above a spillway. "When flood comes, we brace. When ice comes, we ration. When spring arrives, we mend fences before plantings. The crown is a promise to organize hurt into something survivable." "You speak like a steward," I said, surprised. "Not a conqueror." "I have been both," he said without pride. "Conquest should end. Stewardship cannot." We ate midday bread by a hot spring pooled in a stone bowl, steam ghosting moss and pale ferns. The air smelled faintly of iron and mint. "Moonwells," Kaelin said, rolling his sleeves. "Old wolves swore their oaths where water and heat cut winter down to size." "You believe the old stories?" I asked. "I believe they taught discipline," he said. "And discipline keeps a pack alive." He didn't look at me when he added, "It also keeps a king from confusing want with need." A gust carried mountain from his skin to mine, pine, smoke, sweat, and my stomach did something ungoverned and unhelpful. "You speak as if the wolf argues with the man," I said too quickly. "They debate," he allowed, and stood. "Come. We have a dam to inspect." We returned at dusk, hooves clicking on stone. The mountain had changed color twice. The courtyard smelled of stew and soap. In the entry hall, a courier waited with a travel-stained satchel. Thorn tore a seal, scanned a tight hand with no flourishes, and passed the page to Kaelin. The king's jaw went iron. "What is it?" I asked before I learned not to ask. "A guest from the south," he said flat. "Lord Blackwood seeks mutual benefit." The words tasted foul. "And brings his daughter, Lady Valeria." I didn't know the name, but the way Unia stiffened behind me told a story. "Should I?" "You should eat," Kaelin said, as if directing a squad. "Then sleep. Tomorrow I will host jackhalls. The next day, if I must, I will send them home hungry." He meant it as reassurance. It cinched my nerves anyway. Back in my rooms, night pooled deep in corners. I let the bath go cold watching steam thin on the window, and realized there was no true quiet in Caerdalos. Everything hummed stone, water, wolves. I set the pendant on my tongue like a coin and tasted Hollowmere's river mud and the wild thyme that grew in its banks. I decided that if I was to stand here, I would stand in more than borrowed courage. I would stand in mine. Blackwood arrived at noon in velvet and winter roses, the kind bred to bloom under glass. He measured the mountain the way merchants measure silk, 2 fingers and a smirk. Lady Valeria glittered a measured distance behind him, beauty honed like a knife, crimson dress fitted as if stitched to her bones. In the great hall she smiled without showing a single tooth. I was seated 2 places to the king's left as Thorn had arranged, far enough to be plausible, close enough to be unmistakable. The court's attention gathered like frost around a window. "Your Majesty," Blackwood purred, spreading hands heavy with rings. "The South salutes your steady hand. We bring old wine, new maps, and a suggestion." "The order speaks volumes," Kaelin said dryly. "We'll test the wine and burn the maps. Speak the suggestion." Valeria's lashes dipped. "An alliance," she said, voice bell smooth. "Our bloodlines strengthen yours. My wolf is accommodating. The table chilled. I felt Thorn's awareness settle over us like a cloak. Kaelin's answer was courteous and cutting. A king's bed is not a trading post. A pulse of whispers. Valeria didn't flush. Forgive a beta who longs to be useful to a king. I had no right to speak. I spoke anyway. Usefulness is measured in outcomes, not offerings, I said, keeping my voice soft enough that only the near tables would hear. If your maps take land and give hunger, their ink is blood. Valeria's gaze found me with surgical precision. And you are? Mira of Hollowmere, I said. An Omega who knows what hunger looks like in a winter that lasts too long. Northland winters always last too long, she said silkily. Perhaps a southern hand at your hearth would learn to bank the fire. Perhaps northern stone would crack under southern heat. Thorn murmured, bland as milk. Laughter pricked the tension and slid off. We bled through courses. Blackwood complimented the crystal. Kaelin asked after the southern roads swallowed last month by mud. Valeria complimented the music. I breathed and kept my hands still. Near the end, the king rose, broke custom, and extended his hand to me. Walk, he said. Not a question. A rescue rapped as a test. I took it. In the side cloister, cold air did the work wine had failed to do. You dislike them, I blurted, then added. I mean, I understood them, he corrected. Which is worse? Will you send them home? When proof fits a chain around Blackwood's neck, he said. Until then, I will smile and count knives. I hesitated. Why seat me where you did? It had made me a target. It had made me seen. He stopped beneath a lintel where frost had painted lace on stone. Because hiding rots the spine. Because your place, if it becomes your place, will be there regardless. Because the wolf in me wants to put you behind me and bare his teeth. The man knows the king must teach the wolf better habits. He said it without heat, as one declares the weather. The honesty scalded. I braced my palm against the cold wall. I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I know how to be a king, he said. The crown sat. I learned. If we choose this, we will learn like wolves, watch, try, correct, repeat. Snow began without warning, flakes fine as sifted flour. I thought of Hollowmere's cellar, and the first door the envoys opened, and decided I would not go back into anything that shut. I woke to Unia's fist on my door and the smell of copper. Don't touch the basin, she said, voice too even. Please, my lady. The water in the ewer wore a sheen faintly iridescent. Thorn entered behind two sentinels and held a strip of paper to the surface. Its edge blackened where it touched. Alkaloid, he said. Slow, clean, easily blamed on fragile Omega constitutions. The sentinels went stone still. I went colder than the window. Who? We'll know when we catch them trying again, Thorn said. Cowards seldom change methods mid-hunt. Kaelin came a heartbeat later, hair damp, tunic unlaced, eyes silvered at the rim. The wolf was awake and leashed with both hands. Pack what you need, he said to Unia without looking away from me. Move her into the royal wing. That will scream, Thorn warned mildly. Let it, Kaelin growled. Then, to me, softer. No one touches what I protect. I am not yours, I said, because the words mattered as line and vow. Not yet, he said, and the wolf in his voice curled around the syllables like a guard dog around a flame. But you are in my care. I was installed in a suite that adjoined his by a sitting room hung with maps inked in many hands. Unia filled drawers like she was laying siege. Sentinels took posts with the stillness of statues. I couldn't stop seeing the rainbow sheen, couldn't stop hearing my grandmother say, when fear knocks, ask who sent it, and what it wants. Who sent it? I asked Thorn when he brought a tray as if I were a child and he the ant who never forgot you preferred honey to jam. Blackwood? Probably, Thorn said. But he rents hands that take orders from other shadows. We'll pull until a mouth opens. Am I supposed to hide? I asked, testing my own temper. You're supposed to live, he said. And watch. And learn where the hallways go while escorted, so later you can run them unescorted and appear to float. I snorted despite the tightness in my chest. You make queens like battlements, I said. I prefer bridges, he replied. Battlements are easy to see. Bridges change the shape of a war. That night, I sat across from Kalen in his study, the door to our shared room open like a held breath. We ate in the glow of banked coals in silence that felt like a blanket instead of a wall. What did you dream of before the crown? I asked at last. Rivers, he said, surprising me. Fishing with my father. He smelled like smoke and juniper. He taught me knots and patience. I thought I would map tributaries for a living, not treaties. And now? I asked. Now I dream of winter breaking, he said simply. And of a pack that eats together because we planned well, not because we won a raid. He lifted his glass, then set it down untouched. What do you dream of, Omega? Belonging, I said, the truth no longer stumbling. Not being kept. Being necessary. Not for womb or pretty speech, but because I can mend a place where two sides tear. His gaze held without pressing. A queen who brokers heat between hard weather, he murmured. That would be dangerous. For our enemies. 3 days before the full moon, Kaerdalos shifted into ceremony gear. Fountains were veiled in silk, torches oiled, moonwells ringed with evergreen. Tradition demanded the Alpha King make his choice beneath open sky, steam, and candle flame, with the council and the pack as witness. Tradition also demanded at least the appearance of options. There were 3 of us. A quiet beta from the eastern pines, Anise, who smiled like bread smells, Lady Valeria, resplendent and poisonous, and me, the Omega Blackwood called provincial while pretending not to care whether Kalen breathed tomorrow. From my new balcony, I watched crews float candles on the wells until the water wore stars. Unia laced me into forest green with silver stitching at the cuffs. Not blue, she said when I touched my old gown. Tonight you are root and bough. Tonight I am Corey, I said lightly. Her look told me she'd heard the part that wasn't a joke. The council called me at noon. 7 chairs in a crescent, an empty stone seat for the one under consideration. Elder Mare sat in the center, hair like winter wheat braided with copper thread. She did not smile. Mira of Hollowmere, she said, voice clear as a bell. We will not ask your lineage, we have it. We will not ask your age, we know it. We will ask why you stay. Because I am tired of rooms with only one door, I said. Because I believe an Omega can be more than heirloom and cradle. Because the Alpha King speaks of stewardship like a vow and I want to stand where vows are kept. Pretty words, Counselor Edrin said. Someone had to say it. He had the jaw for it. Work words, I corrected. They blister if you carry them wrong. Mare's mouth edged approval. What will you do when your counsel is ignored? She asked. Wait, listen harder, try again, I said. Then if wrong turns to harm, I will be the first voice the king hears, the last one he must answer to. And when the wolf in him answers before the man? Edrin pressed. I will stand by the man until the wolf remembers whose teeth he bears, I said, heart banging. And I will love both or neither. There is no safe half. Silence pooled. Mare's gaze flicked to the pendant at my throat. From your grandmother? Yes. Good, she said. You know the weight of a gift carried forward. When Thorn fetched me, his eyes held relief like a small fire cupped in wind. Well enough? I asked. Well enough to make enemies who prefer women who agree, he said. And to make friends who are starving. For what? For a queen who doesn't treat the crown like a mirror. The moon rose fat as an oath. Steam braided the cold air at the moonwells. Candlelight made the water look alive from within. Wolves stood in packed crescents, nobles in embroidered furs, millers with chapped hands, children craning, sentinels blank as blades. Music coiled and fell quiet. Kalen entered not in velvet but in the thick black leathers of an alpha about to choose. The circlet on his brow was iron hammered thin, not jeweled. He looked like a king because he remembered the wolf. Elder Mare lifted her staff. As our mothers' did, as our fathers' swore, the pack gathers to witness the king's choosing, she intoned. Let the mountain hear. Let the water know. He went to Anais first. He took her hands and thanked her for courage, for leaving a home that needed her, for proof that betas carried steel this court often forgot. She curtsied and smiled like bread smells and returned to her people with her head high. He faced Valeria next. Her mouth held triumph and venom in equal measures. Lady Valeria, Kaelin said, polite and cool, you bring beauty sharpened by ambition. I release you to seek a place that requires such blades. Her chin notched up a breath. Do not mistake restraint for lack of edge, your majesty. I never do, he said. Then he came to me. He did not lift his hand immediately. He looked, and in the looking I understood why wolves bow their heads before a leader, not for worship, but to be seen in full and not flinch. The world went quiet enough to hear water blink against stone. Mirror of Hollowmere, he said, voice lower than the night. Omega, not for display but for doing. You came to me carrying fear like a lantern and refused to set it down where I couldn't see it. You told me truths I did not want and asked for a partnership I do. He extended his hand, palm up, not a command but an invitation. Step out of the shadows. Don't hide from me, little wolf. Not now. Not when the work begins. I placed my hand in his. It fit like something found, not forced. Steam feathered my cheeks. Somewhere a child laughed once, cut off by a mother's shushing hand. Elder Mare bound our wrists with a cord of iron thread and willow. Witness, she said, and the pack howled, not savage but jubilant, sound like a river breaking ice. We knelt together and touched the water. Heat climbed my arm as if the mountain had decided to enter my veins. Kaelin leaned, forehead to mine, the oldest gesture wolves know. We choose, he whispered. As king and omega. As alpha and mate. As two hands learning one task. In the edges of the gathering, Blackwood's face pinched into a smile too tight to be anything but pain. Thorn's nod was small and satisfied, a hunter seeing a snare hold. Unia cried and pretended she had got smoke in her eyes. When we rose, the cord cut from our wrists and tied around my pendant, the mountain did not move. But the shape of the pack shifted one notch toward whatever came next. I felt the click deep in my ribs. A door inside me unlatched. Hiding had been a habit. Standing would have to become one too. The celebration became a tide I could only choose how to stand in. Courtiers approached with goblets and bows, words curved like fishhooks. Your Majesty, Your Grace, my lady. Names slid past in a current. Stewards, marshals, guild heads from the tannery and granary, a priestess of the wells whose hair smelled faintly of fennel. I held fast to small anchors, Unia's steady presence at my shoulder, Thorn's unreadable calm, the weight of the tied cord warm against my sternum. Blackwood reached us with a smile that could cut parchment without wrinkling it. He bowed just shallow enough to insult without proof. Northland has always surprised me, he said. Tonight doubly so. Your talent for surprise ends at my borders, Kaelin answered, perfectly pleasant. Enjoy the wells and the wine. Valeria's gaze raked me lightly, a cat considering a bird that had grown new teeth. I envy you, she said. To be chosen is stabilizing. Stability is for bridges, I replied, borrowing Thorn's word. Not women. Something flickered, annoyance, amusement, I couldn't tell, and then she was gone, a crimson peel slipping through dancers. When the last toast was made and the music gentled into something like prayer, Kaelin guided me out along the colonnade where snows sifted as fine as flour. The mountain hummed around us, quiet but vigilant. There will be a challenge, he said without preface. Blackwood will not leave with empty hands. He will try to take honor or blood. What form? I asked. Trial by hunt, Thorn said, stepping into the corridor's shadow like he'd been hiding in it the whole time. An old rite in the southern codes. He will claim insult, demand a run through the ashen ravine at dawn. First to take the crest flag claims precedence on the treaty discussed tonight. And what treaty? I asked, heart already quickening. Border waterways, Kalen said. And who draws canal gates in years when the ice breaks late? In bad hands it drowns 3 villages downriver. Then we run, I said before my fear could build a cage and put me inside it. Thorn studied me. Queens do not usually. Usually is the cousin of hiding, I said. If my life is to mean anything here, it cannot only be candles and speeches. Kalen's mouth softened. The wolf in his eyes leaned forward as if scenting a thing it liked. You will not be asked to shift, he said. Our law forbids it from an omega on a chosen night. But you can ride. Ash knows my mind. Kestrel knows yours. We'll make a pack of 2 and a shadow. What shadow? Me, Thorn said mildly. Someone has to count knives. I laughed, breath trailing pale and a little wild. Then teach me, I said to Kalen, how you run the ravine and keep your bones in one piece. He nodded once, already turning toward the inner stairs. We have 6 hours of night. We'll use all of them. Unia, bring gloves. Mira. He glanced back, command gentled into invitation. Don't hide your fear. Show it to the mountain. It respects honesty more than pride. The training arena below the keep smelled of sand, sweat, and old iron. Torches smoked thinly along the walls. Beneath the haze, table-sized stones had been dragged into an uneven lattice like frozen waves. Kalen stripped to his shirt, tied his hair back, and handed me fingerless riding gloves, the leather supple as a promise. He gestured me toward the stones. The ravine is narrower than this. The ledges are worse. We'll practice feet before hooves. We ran. Not gracefully at first. I was Hollomer strong, long days, steep paths. But the mountain demanded different muscles and unflinching eyes. Kalen moved like water and weather, boots finding purchase where I saw only shadow. When my steps faltered, his hand appeared, steady, brief, removed as soon as I took it. Thorn watched from the edge, calling small corrections in a voice that never rose. Breathe on the turn. Don't look at the fall, look at the next hold. Trust the surface you choose. 3 times I slid and caught myself on bruises. 4 times I swore quietly, which made Kalen grin like a wolf unthreatened for the first time that day. Good, he said when my shoulders stopped climbing my ears. You curse like a scout. That means your lungs still work. When you became king at 15. I panted between stones. Who taught you not to die on these rocks? An ant with a mean cane and 3 scars, he said, leaping to a ledge that would have made my mother faint. And my father, before he was taken from the river. He taught me to walk upstream, so I would never trust only the current to place my feet. Walk upstream, I repeated, tucking the phrase somewhere I could find it later. Understood. By the hour's end, my calves burned, my palms stung, and fear had settled into something useful, alertness without panic. Unia appeared with a lidded bowl of broth. I drank salt and heat and felt my hands stop shaking. The world had narrowed to essentials: breath, stone, the thud of my pulse, the king's voice measuring my stride to his. When we finally climbed back toward our rooms, dawn's edge silvered the eastern windows. Kalen paused at the threshold to the shared sitting room. Mira. I turned, breath still coming in thin flags. If at any point I say stop, he said, eyes steady, we stop. Trial or tradition be damned. I will not spend a queen on a man's pride. I'm not a coin, I said, tired enough to be wholly honest. And I won't spend you either. I touched the knuckles of his free hand, a small press of skin to skin. We run only if we run together. Something eased in his frame like a 100th knot untied. He inclined his head, and Alpha's nod returned with a partner's, and let me go to sleep 3 hours hard and fast. The Ashen Ravine didn't care about kings, betas, or well-combed hair. It was a split in the mountain where ice had once driven its fist and refused to unclench. On one side, a scrim of trees clung to rock like stubborn thoughts. On the other, stone sheared away into an echoing dark that told the story of every fool who had slipped. A banner marked the crest, a strip of pale cloth fixed to a thorned hawthorn that grew almost horizontally from the rim. Blackwood arrived in dark green and smugness, riding a glossy destrier that did not like the mountain. Valeria looked immaculate in fitted leathers. She glanced at my boots, at my gloves, and smiled as if warmth were a sin she wasn't tempted by. Courtiers lined the safer ledges. The council looked like carved saints, expressionless, intent. Thorn rode to the judge's stone and recited the terms, rolling the southern clause in his mouth like a foreign sweet. First hand to tear the banner claims precedence in the waterway treaty negotiation. Blood spilled beyond scratches disqualifies. Shifting restricted to challengers of alpha rank. Omegas ride, not run. Agreed, Blackwood said. A simple test for a simple people. Agreed, Kalen said, and the pack's attention leaned toward him as if pulled by a tide. We took positions at the starting cairn. Ash stamped 2 breaths and went still beneath Kalen like a held thought. Kestrel jittered beneath me and then, at my exhale, found her feet the way she always had, sensible, honest, brave enough. Unia caught my knee and squeezed it once. Breathe, she mouthed. Thorn tipped 2 fingers off his brow and vanished into shadow. The horn blew. Ash surged forward. Kestrel followed, hooves a beat behind his. Stone flashed underfoot, gray to gray again. I kept my eyes where Thorn had taught me, on the next hold, not the fall. Wind peeled tears from the corners of my eyes and flung them behind us. Blackwood came hard on our flank, his stallion fighting the narrow, iron shoes striking sparks when he misstepped. Kalen's body spoke a language Ash knew by heart. Weight left, a knee, the twitch of a wrist, and the bay slipped past a treacherous outcrop like a fish through reeds. Midway, the path pinched to a bridge where stone and time had conspired to make mischief. Kalen went first. The bridge groaned. Kestrel's ears flicked back at me. Sure? I breathed yes into her mane. She put 1 hoof, then another. A rock loosed and went singing into the dark. On the far side, a figure moved where no figure should have been. Hooded, low, a flick of metal at the belt. My mouth went dry. Knives. Right. Kalen barked, and Ash leaped high and mean. The hooded man flinched. A dagger glanced off Ash's breastplate, left a bright line, and fell. Kestrel gathered herself and sprang. I ducked the wild, useless swing the man made and heard Thorn laugh somewhere not far away, a delighted sound I never wanted turned on me. Then the ravine widened, a man's corridor opening to a long final curve beneath the crest. Blackwood snarled and dug in spurs. His stallion lunged, and slid. Iron lost the argument with Frost. The animal stumbled to its knees, skidded, found purchase at the last second by snapping at the air with all its teeth. Blackwood hauled leather, swore, and recovered well enough to look composed for anyone who hadn't just watched death miss him by a breath. We reached the last pitch. The hawthorn hung over nothing. The banner flirted with the wind. Kalen stood in his stirrups and leaned as Ash shouldered into the final drop. He was close enough to catch it. He could take it. He didn't. Go, he said, and his palm hit the small of my back with steady force. Ash slid left, making a pocket for Kestrel to get her nose even with his flank. I understood and stood. Kestrel rose. My fingers brushed cloth and tore. The horn blew again, not a start this time, but an ending. Sound ricocheted off stone, and came back to us seasoned with cheers and curses. I threw the banner to Thorn where he appeared like a door opening where there had been wall. He caught it and lifted it, expression minimal, satisfaction metaphysical. Precedence to the Northlands, he called. By flag and witness. Blackwood's smile failed at last. It showed too many teeth and none of them kind. A king hiding behind his omega, he said loudly enough to carry. Kalen turned Ash with predator quiet. A king running with his mate, he corrected, voice like the inside of a deep well. Learn the difference. It will save your life. Back at Caerdalos, the pack's mood felt like a fire that knew which way to lean. Workers laughed as they hauled timber for noon repairs. Children tried to balance on the low wall, and fell harmlessly into snow. Even the geese in the pond sounded less affronted by the shape of their day. But the palace breathed a different air, layered, suspicious, full of eyes. If Blackwood had knives in a hood at the ravine, he had spoons in public halls that could poison just as cleanly. Thorn convened a quiet council in the map room with only those whose names he would stake on his own blood: Mayor, Unia, the captain of sentinels, a taciturn miller whose brother ran the lower forges, and a woman from the kitchens who did not bother to bow. "We have 3 levers," Thorn said, tapping the table. "Food, water, rumor. Blackwood's men will try to pull at least 2. We'll tie our own ropes to them first." "Food?" I asked. "The kitchens," the woman said, her voice salt and smoke. "I am Kess. I count flour by hand and count hands by bread. If any stranger touches my stores, I smell it in my sleep." "Water," the captain added. "The palace cisterns feed from a winter run that can be fouled by a single bucket and a prayer. I have doubled the guards. We will not drink from any vessel left unattended where a bird could sneeze on it." "Rumor," Mayor said, almost smiling. "We will tell truths Blackwood cannot bear and lies he will be forced to deny. Both will cost him." "What truth?" Kalen asked. "That you will reopen the river commons to the human settlements if the spring thaw is late," Mayor answered smoothly. "And that you will protect Omega apprenticeships in trade halls, not just in nurseries." She glanced at me. "If that is what you mean to do." "It is," I said, surprised to hear it from my own mouth before my head had presented it as a polished thought. But it sat right when it landed. Omegas carry heat. We can carry skill. Give them desks and benches in the places where words and would change how a day goes. Then we will make it so," Mayor said, as if she had just ordered tea. Unia's eyes shone. "Girls will stop pretending they don't love sawdust," she whispered, almost to herself. "If Blackwood pushes back," Thorn said, leaning his hips against the table, "we'll let him. He's not built for arguments that require a heart." Kalen looked at me, not asking for permission, only sharing the load in a way that finally made the word partnership feel honest enough to wear. "You will stand with me at the gate when I tell the humans," he said. "Yes," I said without looking away. "Good," he answered, and the first warmth not born from fire touched his mouth. It is past time the crown learned to speak in more than one direction. We called the humans to the east gate at dusk when their shadows would be long and their mouths empty enough to listen. The gate's arch hunched like a giant's shoulders in the cold. Lanterns scraped light across faces lined by winter and work. I saw the Baker twins who brought sweet buns to the lower well on solstice nights. I saw the old woman who sold combs carved from shed antlers. I saw 3 boys who had slipped coins to a sentry to perch on the outer wall and clap quietly when nobody watched. Kalen did not stand on the wall and hold forth. He stood on a barrel dragged out by Kess and spoke like a man at a market. "We are reopening the river commons if spring comes late," he said without preamble. "No tollgate will stand at the lower ford until the 3rd thaw, and any man who tries to levy a fee will make an enemy of the crown." A sound moved through the crowd, relief like a door unlatching. He lifted a hand and it quieted with the easy obedience of respect. "We will also create apprenticeships in the trade halls, wood, metal, ink, for those who have been told their heat is their only worth. Omegas will have seats there if they choose. If you do not like it, bring me an argument that is not made of fear." I stepped up beside him, palms damp inside my gloves, and heard my voice fly on the cold air before fear could drag it back. "If you are an Omega and your uncle says your place is only inside," I called, "tell him your queen will see you at dawn at the joiner's bench. If you are a Beta who thinks you lose by sharing, come to me at the forge and we will count how many nails a city needs." Laughter, sharp and grateful. The boys on the wall grinned like cut purses. Somewhere behind us, I felt Blackwood's gaze like a mosquito you cannot slap. Afterward, a small girl with wind-stung cheeks and a missing front tooth approached with a stick figure of a wolf carved into soft pine. She held it out with both hands. "For you," she said. "For the lady who stands on barrels." I knelt. "What's your name?" "Fi," she said. My mum says I'm an Omega and I should practice sitting pretty. I can sit pretty, she added, demonstrably straightening her spine and plastering on a solemn face. But I like carving better. Then carve, I said, and put the pine wolf in my pocket like an oath. Bring me one in a week that looks like the short-tempered counselor with the eyebrows. Edrin? She giggled. His face is a mountain. Then bring me a mountain with eyebrows, I said gravely, and she ran back to her mother with new speed. Kaylin's hand found the small of my back as we turned toward the keep, not possessive, not steering, just present. You make promises like a general, he murmured. I make them like a person whose grandmother told her stories by hand, I said. If I say I'll be at the joiners, I will be at the joiners. Then I will find a way to keep the court from eating you while you're there, he said lightly, and his eyes said he meant every word. Blackwood did not slink away. Jackals seldom do when the lion's back is turned toward his own den. He shifted his attack from spectacle to shadow, from public insult to the private gnawing that sours a pack from within. Unia found a sentry snoring who did not drink. The miller's brother found a lever on the western sluice jammed with a pebble that had to be carried in a human hand. Kess caught a boy with a southern accent trying to walk apples out the back door with 2 vials tucked under them like yolks. We did not shout. We planted. Mayor drafted decrees in a hand like winter wheat. Simple, legible, stubborn. Thorne let one rumor out that cut Blackwood at the knee. The South wants to charge the North to drink the North's own water. It wasn't entirely true, not entirely false, exactly true in the way a prophecy is, the shape of what will happen if no one chooses better. On the 3rd night after the hunt, as I returned from a late hour at the joiners, 3 girls, 2 awkward boys, 10 fingers covered in splinters and pride, a figure detached from a pillar near the royal wing and bowed as if performing in a room where the audience had already gone home. Valeria. Your Majesty, she said. May I offer counsel unasked? You may offer, I said. Unia, 2 steps behind me, shifted her weight and took the measure of the space without moving her eyes. Valeria's smile did not reach her molars. Blackwood won't push the banner again. He prefers strings to spears. He has bought 2 counselors in the past. He will try to buy Edrin. Edrin's eyebrows cannot be bought, I said. He would die before letting anyone arrange them. She almost laughed then and caught herself like a dancer catching a foot on a nail. His pride is purchasable, she said. If Blackwood suggests you mean to take his old power, codifying Omega apprenticeships without counsel, he will turn and bite. I am not codifying without counsel, I said. You are speaking in the square before he speaks in chambers, she countered. For men like Edrin, that is the same insult dressed in a friendlier coat. Why tell me? I asked. You came to supplant me. I came to be near power, Valeria said, honest as salt. Standing too close to Blackwood right now feels like sharpening a blade held at my own throat. She tilted her head, the movement oddly childlike. I would not see you bled in a hallway. If you are cut, let it be on a field where everyone must show his knife. Unia's breath warmed the back of my neck. If this is a bid for a place, she said to Valeria, it is a clever one. It is a warning, Valeria said. The cleverness is a wrapper so you will swallow it. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. For the wrapper. After she left, Unia touched my sleeve. We should tell Thorne. We will, I said. But first I will tell Mayor. And then, I looked at the map room's closed door and thought of bridges and battlements and women who carve wolves. I will ask that Edrin meet me alone and lay the truth out like tools on a bench. Alone? Unia said, skeptical. With the door open and 2 sentinels on either side, I amended. And a bowl of Kessa's soup because no one plots well with warm broth on their tongue. Unia smiled with her whole face for the first time that week. You're learning court. No, I said, surprised to find it was true when I said it. I am teaching it to speak in a language I can live in. Edrin did not like being summoned by anyone younger than his favorite pair of boots, much less by a newly chosen Omega Queen who had, according to gossip, ridden the ashen ravine and spoken on barrels like a market crier. But Mayor's message carried my request with the quiet authority of a winter river, firm, inevitable, able to move stones if ignored. He arrived at the map room with his chin high and his eyebrows, those famous brows, drawn together like two wolves refusing to share the same meat. I had arranged the space exactly as I intended him to see it, door open, 2 sentinels visible, the long table cleared except for 3 wooden objects, my grandmother's pendant, the pine wolf carved by Fia, and a sealed parchment bearing the council's crest. And at the table's center, a steaming bowl of Kessa's bone broth. "Sit, Councillor Edrin," I said. "Please. The soup is not a trap. Only warm." His brows twitched. "Food is a poor tool for bribery, Your Majesty." "It isn't a bribe," I said, taking my own seat opposite him. "It's for thinking. Hard conversations go crooked when the tongue dries." He sat. Slowly. As if every joint in his body resisted the notion of sharing air with change. I waited until he had a spoonful. Then another. When his shoulders eased a fraction, I spoke. "You've served the Northlands for 37 years," he said, pride almost covering the exhaustion behind it. "Then you know more than most what hunger looks like." I gestured to the bowl. "Why do you think the human's eyes shone last night?" He sniffed, not at the soup, but at the memory of the gate. "Because you handed out hope like handbills. Carelessly." "Not carelessly," I said. "Deliberately. Hope that sits in council chambers gathers dust. Hope that stands at the gate gathers hands." His eyebrows rose, not in anger this time, but interest he did not want me to see. "You tread close to bypassing process. The council was not informed." "You are the council," I said. "You are here. I am informing you now before formal ink touches parchment. I want to propose an addition to the apprentice's decree, one that bears your name as co-sponsor." That startled him more than any challenge would have. "My name?" "Yes. You know tradition's architecture better than any of us. Help me build this so it stands." If Blackwood whispers that I mean to gut the council, help me prove we strengthen it. Edrin stared at the pine wolf I'd set between us. He lifted it, surprisingly gentle for hands known for pounding tables. "Who carved this?" "A little Omega girl with splinters and teeth," I said. "Her name is Fia. She thinks her future is sitting pretty. I think her future is carving the council chamber doors if someone hands her a chisel instead of a chair cushion." A long pause. Then Edrin set the wolf down and leaned back, the lines at his eyes softening like thaw. "You are dangerous," he said finally. "I hope so," I said. "But only to cages." His breath left him in something between a sigh and a laugh. "Draft your decree. I'll help word it so it cannot be twisted by soft-mouthed vipers. And if the South pushes, we push back," I finished. "No," Edrin corrected, surprising me. "We push forward. So far they cannot catch our heels." For the first time, he looked directly at me, not at my Omega status, not at my age, but at the shape of my intent. He rose. "One bowl of soup," he said, almost grudging approval in his voice. "Cheaper than most treaties." "Broth is magic," I said simply. His eyebrows twitched. "I'll expect Kess to bring more to the next session." I inclined my head. Done. When he left, Mayor slipped in from the corridor, lips curved in a way that felt like rare sunlight on stone. "You spoke to him as if he were a person, not a piece," she said. "He is a person," I replied. "Pieces break. People bend if treated with hands that know how." Mayor touched the pine wolf. "Keep this close. It is your reminder of why change must come slow enough to keep hearts intact, fast enough to stop rot." I thought of Fia's earnest face, of Edrin's callous hand lifting the little carving as if it were a fragile truth. "Yes," I said. "Slow enough not to shatter. Fast enough not to freeze." Blackwood did not wait long to test the council's seams. That evening, a courier, accidentally, dropped letters at the palace gate, identical copies addressed to tradesmen, human representatives, and 2 counselors. The message inside dripped honey and poison in equal measure. While the Crown entertains radical changes that risk destabilizing long-standing order, the South offers apprenticeship bonds with generous stipends for Omegas seeking structured purpose. No need for them to burden the kingdom with fanciful ambitions beyond their nature. 3 hours later, rumor had begun to coil around the lower courtyards like smoke. The Queen plans to empty coffers to teach Omegas play skills. The South offers real gold while the North trades in stories. Omegas belong in homes, not in guild halls. Thorne called it a precision rot. Mayor called it a shoddy stitch. Kalen called it what it was: war in silk clothing. He summoned the council at once. When we entered the chamber, the letters lay in a neat fan across the table like blades arranged for a feast. Blackwood himself came, invited by Kalen, to the visible shock of 3 counselors. "Since these letters bear your crest," Kalen said, voice controlled as banked coals, "I thought you might like to hear the council's discussion firsthand." Blackwood inclined his head with the oily grace of a fox in a henhouse that has learned to wear feathers. "Transparency is refreshing," he said. "Rare in the North." Edrin spoke before anyone else could, the same man who only a day ago had been ready to bristle at me for speaking first. "The apprenticeships proceed. The council will support them." His voice brooked no debate. Blackwood's smile cracked by a millimeter. "Counselor, surely you see the risks? Omegas with sharp tools and unfiltered ideas? The Northlands are cold, but you needn't freeze wisdom out entirely." Mayor lifted one eyebrow. "Wisdom that fears hands gaining skill is not wisdom. It is control hiding behind embroidery." A ripple of poorly concealed agreement moved around the table. Blackwood turned to Kalen. "Your Majesty, consider the optics. An Omega Queen overturning tradition within a week of her choosing? It invites revolt." Kalen leaned forward, resting his hands on the oak. "Mara does not overturn tradition. She evolves it." His gaze sharpened. "As every wise king and council has done since the mountain first gave us shelter." "Stagnation is death, Lord Blackwood. And I do not intend to bury my kingdom alive to preserve your comfort." The room thrummed. Blackwood's eyes cut to me like knives dipped in winter. "And you, little Omega, do you think you can forge a future with your small hands that will not crumble under true weight?" My pulse leapt, but I did not look away. "I don't forge alone," I said. "We build together. It will hold because it belongs to more than one voice." "Pretty," he said softly, "but delusion wears lace well." Kalen rose, the kind of rise that made every spine in the room follow instinctively. "Lord Blackwood," he said, voice no longer coal, but steel. "You are a guest here tonight. Tomorrow, you will be escorted to the border. You have worn out the courtesy of my hearth." Blackwood's nostrils flared. "This is a mistake you will feel for years." Kalen stepped closer, silver edging his irises. "I would rather feel the consequence of growth than the rot of fear. Northlands does not yield to threats dressed as advice." The doors opened, not by magic, but by 2 sentinels who had been waiting for this exact moment. Blackwood hesitated only long enough to smear the room with a final look. "A crown that listens to an Omega's heart," he said, "will one day break at the sound of hers shattering." Mayor answered before Kalen could. "Then it will have been a crown worthy of wearing." The doors shut behind him with the softest click I had ever heard. It sounded like a lock settling, not trapping, but sealing something dangerous on the outside. Blackwood departed at dawn with the kind of composure men wear like armor when their plans have started leaking. 2 wagons, 6 riders, velvet wrapped against wind. Kalen watched from the south parapet, hands on the stone, eyes wolf-cold. Thorne counted heads, then shadows. 7 leaving, he murmured. 9 arrived. 2 unaccounted. Knives that stayed, Unia said grimly. We didn't wait for the knives to choose time and place. Kalen ordered a quiet sweep, sentinels in servant greys, smiths with cudgels tucked into apron folds. I took the less heroic task, walking kitchens, cistern halls, storerooms, smiling and speaking names while Kess checked seals and juniors checked one another. An Omega's presence changes a room. I used that unmagical magic as a lantern and let it show where fear smelled wrong. At the lower cistern, a boy no older than the comb seller's youngest stood too still near the pulley. His boots were wet to the ankle though the floor was dry. "What's your name?" I asked, voice easy. "Rowan," he said. The words sounded borrowed. Kess, behind me, said nothing, but I felt her attention narrow to a blade point. "You're far from the apple cellar, Rowan," I said, and took 2 steps sideways to block the fastest path to the exit. "Which house?" No answer. Only the tiny shift of weight that always precedes flight. Unia was already there, as if we'd rehearsed it. She closed the door with a soft click that reminded me of the council chamber last night. A sentinel melted out of shadow. Thorn would have applauded his timing. The boy looked at my hands, not my face. I opened my palms. "No claws," I said quietly. "But I can smell black root on your skin. Whoever paid you told you it would send someone to sleep if you tipped it in the cistern. They didn't tell you it rots lungs." Tears came fast and ugly, like he hadn't meant to make them. "He said my mother, he said her debts. We'll untangle them," I said before he could break wider. "But you must tell Thorn exactly which door the man used and what he wore." We sat him on a crate and gave him a cup to hold. Unia found a blanket. The sentinel went to fetch Thorn. Kess stood guard like a god people forgot existed. By noon, the 2 missing men were dragged from a maintenance tunnel with hands bound and faces bruised by narrow stone, a place only someone who had studied maps of the palace veins would attempt to use. Thorn carried those maps. Blackwood had stolen a copy once. He hadn't learned enough to avoid a snag where the old wall buckled. "Jackals," Thorn said, almost kindly. "Always hungry enough to rush." We escorted Blackwood to the border anyway, an honor guard of 10, a courtesy turned into a lesson. He tried one last time to sour the air. "You make laws with a child's chalk," he told Kalen, reining in where the Northlands road bends toward the flats. "It will wash in the first rain. Then we'll write again," the Alpha King said. "With ink. With iron. With work in the next day and the next." Blackwood's gaze slid to me. "And what will you do when your king discovers your idealism is heavy to carry?" "Carry some," I said. "Or carve it lighter. That is what partnership means." He bared teeth that never learned how to smile. "You will tire." "I will," I said. "And I will sleep, and wake, and begin again." He spat on the road then, a petty exclamation point, and turned his horse south. The wind ate the sound of his departure. The mountain watched without interest, as mountains do. On our ride home, Kalen's jaw unclenched by degrees. "Rowan?" he asked. "In the scullery," I said. "Debts to a southern factor. Kess is already speaking with the guild. We'll cancel them with work, not coin. Not charity," he said, approving. "A way back." "A bridge," I said. We shared a look that meant the same thing. That night, Mayor brought parchment while the lamps burned low. "Write your law," she said, setting a clean sheet before me and a sharpened quill beside it. "Edrin wants first right toward the teeth. Thorn wants the wherefores to be short enough to memorize. The king wants it enforceable." "What do you want?" "Doors," I said. "Open ones. Then make hinges," Mayor said. "Hinges are law." We stood together on the balcony above the torchlit courtyard, the night air cool and threaded with pine. Below us, the Northlands seemed to breathe, chimney smoke rising, lanterns glowing, wolves patrolling the ridges beyond the walls. The decree had been read, the councils had spoken, and the South had been sent home. A week had passed since Blackwood's departure. A week of whispers settling into silence, of eyes that once watched me with doubt now meeting mine with something softer, consideration, perhaps even respect. A week of feeling the kingdom shift, not with upheaval, but with the steady, quiet turning of a wheel long stuck. I rested my palms against the cold stone of the balcony rail. "It's strange," I admitted, voice barely above the wind. I thought when change finally began, it would feel loud. Triumphant. As if we'd conquered something. Kalen stepped behind me, his warmth at my back grounding as ever. Most victories arrive like sunrise, he murmured. Slow enough that you don't notice the light until you can see the world clearly. I exhaled, tension melting from my shoulders. Blackwood will return with allies. The South won't accept this quietly. No, Kalen agreed. But next time, the North won't face them alone. He turned me gently to face him. And nor will I. The way he looked at me still held the weight of a choice, his, but somehow also mine. The man beneath the crown, the wolf beneath the skin, both present, both watching. You change things here, he said. Not through force. Not through fear. But by refusing to stay small so others remain comfortable. A soft laugh broke from me. I didn't feel very large through most of it. Strength isn't in volume, he said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It's in truth. The moon climbed free of the clouds then, lighting the balcony in silver. Kalen held out his hand, not commanding, never that, but offering. Alara of Silvercrest, he said, using my full name with intention. When you first came here, you were hidden, even from yourself. You feared your voice, your power, your future. Now you stand at the edge of a kingdom reshaped by your courage. I took his hand, the feel of it familiar, and yet somehow always new. Not by my courage alone. No, he agreed. By partnership. He drew me closer, his forehead resting against mine in the ancient wolf vow of equals. Walk beside me, he whispered. Not as a shadow, not as a queen locked in duty, but as the mate I choose with every part of me. Emotion rose inside me, so full, so fierce it almost unmade me. On one condition, I said, voice unsteady from the truth forming inside it. That you stop believing you must carry every burden alone. I won't hide from you. But you must not hide from me either. His breath left him, a release, a surrender, and something like relief. The wolf in his eyes receded, not suppressed but at peace. No more hiding, Kalen vowed. Not for either of us. Then he kissed me, slow, sure, sealing promise rather than claiming. The kind of kiss that didn't conquer, but invited. The kind that didn't cage, but opened every locked door inside a person and said you are safe to step through. When we finally drew apart, the Northlands lay quiet below us, the future wide and unwritten before us. Not perfect. Not easy. But ours. I leaned into him, my head resting where King and Wolf both lived. Do you think we're ready for what comes next? I asked. No, he said truthfully. But we'll become ready. Together. And for the first time in my life, the unknown did not look like darkness to hide within, but a road to walk, hand in hand, toward a dawn neither of us needed to face alone.